Yeah, the first one sucked though. Second one wasn't much better.
The second one was pretty good. It didn't keep bringing bugs in the house, so.
Hey, this is Hunter with Lone Star Woodworking, and as you just heard my wife say, this is my third attempt at building us an entry table. This was the first attempt. It was a mesquite waterfall entry table that actually turned out really, really awesome, but it wasn't properly dried and actually brought bugs into the house. This was the second one, and it's just a live edge pecan table with some flowy line curva legs, which is what we're going to be using for this build. And it looked fine, it just didn't really fit the aesthetic, but it was good enough to stay there for quite a long time. Now, at some point, probably while I was on the toilet, I was scrolling through Instagram and found these two slabs from the Hunsky Hardwood page for sale for $350. And I thought that was a steal for English walnut just alone, but a steal for two English walnut slabs, I pretty much had to have them. I didn't have a plan for them. I had no clue what I was even going to start imagining to do with these things, but I just knew I had to have them. So I bought them, and they sat in my garage for about a year and a half. Now, every few months, I usually go through my house and I figure out what I can replace, because obviously as I build more of these tables, as I gain more experience, my skill gets a whole lot better. And this one particular time, my attention happened to be drawn to our entry table being that live edge pecan, and I thought, nah, that could be better. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing with one of these slabs. Now, they're pretty much the exact same proportions, so I'm going to be building the exact same thing out of them. But my wife is only going to be getting one of them because that would just be stupid to have two entry tables in our house. Now, you might actually recognize this sheet of MDF if you're I dare to say the word fan of my account, because it is the MDF that I used on the last table where I made kind of an impromptu pour table out of MDF and tape. Now, due to extenuating circumstances, the excitement that I hopefully caused over the potential for a brand new workbench build has to be put on hold. But as things change, we adapt. So instead of building out an entirely new bench and incorporating my table saw into it, I simply built a stand for my table saw and incorporated it onto the existing workbench, so that way it acts as an outfeed table. So that way I don't have to do those super unsafe cuts that you saw me do a minute ago. Now, that second form that I showed you guys is the one that my wife chose, and who can blame her, because it had way more figure in it. Now, before the pour, I'm going to be coating the top, bottom, and outside edges with shellac. Now, I do not coat the inside edges, the edges that actually touch epoxy. I don't coat those with shellac or epoxy because I want the best possible bond during the pour. Now, a lot of people will probably say that that's going to cause staining at some point, and while I understand that that is a possibility, out of the 30 or 40 tables that I've built, I have not had that issue, knock on wood. Now, I know that there are probably a bunch of people out there who have, but up to this day, and with so many different wood species, I've never had that issue. So until it becomes an issue, I'm probably just going to keep doing it. Now, this piece was pretty small, so I elected to not take it to Algoa Millworks because honestly, that just seems like a waste of time and money, because this whole thing took me maybe an hour. The only drawback is that it does make a pretty big mess, and it's a mess that I have to clean up. But after everything was nice and flat, it was time to sand off all of the marks and get it squared up. From there, it's pretty much the normal workflow whenever it comes to building out these tables. Now, what I was not able to show because it was kind of an emergency, I think it was maybe late at night, is that the epoxy actually overheated, right? This deep pour epoxy overheated and cracked. And that's my fault. We've been having a ridiculous heat wave in Texas lately, just like most of the central United States has been having and dealing with. I poured the epoxy on a day where it happened to be over 100 degrees for multiple consecutive days, and heat and epoxy don't really blend well, and that's going to come back to bite me because of how I filled those cracks. But before we get into that, I wanted to show you this really cool new edge profile that I'm trying out. It's just a 45-degree chamfer bit. It's not anything special, but it's nothing I've done before. And I actually thought that this looked a lot more aesthetically pleasing than the roundovers do. From there, it was pretty much business as normal, doing the finish sanding, going all the way up to, I think, 120 or 220. Sanding these edge profiles very, very delicately, because if you were to mess up the proportions to that 45-degree edge and that 90-degree edge, it's going to be a lot more noticeable than if you kind of mess up that small roundover that people normally do. Now, this is me trying to be kind of cheap. I was going to say conservative, but no, let's just call it what it is. It's cheap, right? I was trying to coat the table in some shellac before I put the Rubio Monocoat on, so that way I wouldn't have to use as much Rubio Monocoat. I'm gonna kind of spoil this one for you guys. Don't do that. Allow as much Rubio as possible to soak into the wood, because it's going to give you the best possible protection. I was just kind of tired of buying a whole new $50, $100 can of finish for every 2 tables, and I was trying to be just kind of cheap with it. Now, while the shellac was curing, I wanted to take the pecan table out of the entryway and get all of the legs off of it, so that way I can prepare this slab, the table that I'm working on, to actually receive the legs. And from there, I was trying to sand off the shellac and get a nice smooth surface. It hadn't quite cured in this shot, which is why it's sanding kind of stupid. And I was being lazy, and I decided to go ahead and apply the finish. This looks really good, at least on camera, but you could clearly see that the sanding pattern was super crappy and that I definitely could have and should have done better. But I was hoping that my wife wouldn't notice, so I went ahead with the finish process, wiped everything off, attached the legs, and then it was time to take it inside and get her first reaction.
Look at Mom. Hi.
We're done, that's cool.
What?
I said, babe, open the door.
I can't hear.
I was pretty loud.
Okay, hold on. I'll help you.
That was difficult.
That is so pretty. Got a weird texture. Coloring, okay. Oh, what happened?
Oh, whenever it cracked. Thought I filled it in enough.
No, you didn't see it out there?
Must have sanded it weird. Or it shrunk.
Okay, does it shrink with the heat out there?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. She large and in charge.
Honestly, unless you're looking for that crack, you're not going to see it.
No, I mean.
Plus, there's going to be shit on here, so.
We can go that way more.
All right, guys. So as you heard her point out, there were these little divots in it from where it had cracked initially from the first deep pour, and I filled it with tabletop epoxy. Now, this taught me a really, really good lesson about working with epoxy during different seasons, and especially during different temperature fluctuations. Because I've done this before during the December through February timeframe and not had this issue, because it was already so cold that the epoxy was already pretty much getting contracted to that point where it wasn't going to be noticeable once you brought it inside to a warmer environment. So just be wary of that next time. I decided to go ahead and dig out these cracks and fill them at the proper depth, and that fixed the problem. Now, I could have probably just left it, because after all, this is just our personal table, but My wife said something to me that really just hit hard. She said, if that were going to a customer, that thing would never have left the garage. And she was 100% correct. And that really motivated my butt to get back out there, do things right. And especially since it's for her, of course I got to do it right. And you know what? I'm really happy that I did, because everything ended up looking so much better and those cracks basically disappeared. And guys, this is the final result. I'm incredibly happy with this. It looks so much better than that live edge pecan. Not saying that it looked bad, just that this does objectively look so much better. My wife is very happy with this. Walnut is one of her favorite species. She's never seen me work with English walnut, and she was really excited to get this into our home. And guys, that is going to do it for the video. So I really hope you enjoyed, and if you'd like to see more, I'd really appreciate a subscription and have you come along for the journey. If all you want to do is like or comment, I appreciate that all the same. So guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you next time. See ya.